fuck that. I don't think I'ma regret it when the cars fly. Ain't nothing really hitting like it used to. Gas wake the neighbors up like a rooster. It's a booster, help me see the future. I believe in karma and Kama Sutra, so let's do some.
I can't do it.
Okay.
We'll do it live.
Okay. No.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Right.
Fucking thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
Hello, everybody. Let me say hi to the chat. I'm not going to go all the way back because there's a lot of stuff there, but hi, Tawny C. Hi, Desert Rain. Hi, P. Thomas, AZ, and hopefully I said Mind Hack, and Jessica Worth, Don Lambert. Hello, Wes H. White Snake. Thank you. And Bill Cosby ASMR, and Sub Sailor, and Nemesis in Hades. Hello, sister. And Shannon Lee, and Meatball. All right, cool. So today, this is for people that are new here. Hi, Gina G. For people that are new, you know, this topic is something that is near and dear to my heart, especially the Atlanta child murders. And what we are going to do is, you know, what the kids say, giving someone their flowers. We're going to be giving Detective James Jimmy Boots Rothstein, the Honorable Mayor, his flowers, because we have been able to verify some more information about Willie Dunn Jr. I'm not really going to get into it today, but I just kind of want to lay the framework for the people that are new, that are interested, that may not be familiar with some of this stuff. And we're going to be going through a committee hearing that I had never seen before. And it's very disturbing. So this is the only content warning that you're going to get. And I'm going to run through the Twitter thread really quick because I said that I would in my community section in regards to the last stream, because I am positing the theory right now as it stands based off of where the information is taking me, is that there is a direct line from the John Wayne Gacy, Dean Corll, John Norman network to Washington and to Atlanta and to New York. And as you guys know, I think that a lot of this is just a continuation of those networks. But this is also to kind of, to the people that want to call me QAnon or things like that, this is going to get into the nitty gritty of it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and run the intro and I will be right back.
Come on, let's go. Welcome to the United Snakes, land of the thief, home of the slave. Grand Imperial Guard where the dollar is sacred and proud. Let's do the shit for real, come on now. Smoke and mirrors, stripes and stars, stolen for the cross in the name of God. Bloodshed, genocide, rape and fraud, written to the pages of the law, good law. The cold continent latchkey child ran away one day and started acting foul. King of where the wild things are, daddy's proud, cause the Roman Empire done passed it down. Imported and tortured the workforce and never healed the wounds or shook the curse off. Now the grown-up Goliath nation holding open auditions for the part of David. Can you feel it? Nothing can save you. You question the rain, you get rushed in and chained up. Fist raised, but I must be insane, cause I can't figure a single goddamn way to change. But welcome to the United Snakes, land of the thief, home of the slave. The Grand Imperial Guard where the dollar is sacred and power is God. Welcome to the United Snakes, land of the thief, home of the slave. The Grand Imperial Guard where the dollar is sacred and power is God. All must bow to the fat and lazy. The fuck you obey me, and why do they hate me? Who me? Only 2 generations away from the world's most despicable slavery trade. Pioneered so many ways to degrade a human being that it can't be changed to this day. Legacy so ingrained in the way that we think we no longer need chains to be slaves. Lord, it's a shameful display. The overseers even got raped along the way. Cause the children can't escape from the pain, and they born with the poisonous hatred in their veins. Try and separate a man from his soul, you only strengthen him and lose your own. But shoot that fucker if he walk near the throne. Remind him that this is my home, now I'm gone. Welcome to the United Snakes, land of the thief, home of the slave. The Grand Imperial Guard guard where the dollar is sacred and power is God. Welcome to the United States, land of the thief, home of the slave. The Grand Imperial Guard where the dollar is sacred.
Don't forget, we are literally out here fighting demons, y'all. And hello, properly mattering, I think it is. Hi, Pterodactyl, and hello, Public Awareness, and Petite Penguin, and Misty Blue. And yes, absolutely. I hope that everyone is safe after the hurricane. That looked pretty rough, but I mean, I don't know. I don't really know what I would have done if I was there, to be quite honest. The meteorologist is the only job that you can literally be wrong every single time and you still get paid and people still like you. And I just think that that's all very strange. So, first things first is I am going to pull up and we're just going to kind of go through the Twitter thread. And thank you, Public Awareness. That is Brother Ali. He is a fantastic hip hop artist, and that album's pretty old, but he's very anti-imperialist, and I think that his lyrics are very powerful and very artistic. I know that some people don't like that I use hip hop. I can't please everybody, but I mean, I've been honest from the jump about my love of rap music, hip hop music, and I think that the lyrics there are pretty perfect. Now, let me make sure that I am zoomed in on this so that you guys can see it. So, obviously, I have mentioned the Eye of the Chicken Hawk, right? And I haven't finished it, but the author reached out to me, which I'm beyond grateful because I do categorize Simon Dovey as just with that one book. He's already in the category of Dave McGowan to me. And he shared his insights into the Atlanta child murders, and they're very interesting. But this here, you're going to see that his work, his book, was the piece that I needed. And this is thanks to the help of Dare to Defy and EchoCat. Um, you know, there are people that are vested in this line of research for personal reasons. These things it hasn't been that long since a lot of this stuff has happened. And there are people that I know and that I research with that have been personally impacted by some of these things. So this is very serious to me. This isn't like true crime. I don't play that kind of crap, but let's go ahead and get this pulled up because we're going to see exactly how we got here. So let me make sure you guys can see that. All right, cool. So for the people on Twitter, sorry, but so the aimless flight of the chicken hawk. So this is in relation to the last stream. Some of my recent research has been focused on Bothell, Washington, and what appears to be a possible cult organized crime racket involving DCYF. Peeling back local history reveals old connections to the John Norman Network. And that is John Norman. So right here, you better stop scrolling. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to start at the beginning. The arrest of Roger Douglas Smith, a former Bothell school bus driver. His attorney claimed he lived in the area for over 20 years. He was found with 90 boxes of child sex abuse materials, or CSAM, in his Bothell home. So right here we see fired for having child pornography. And I mean, his lawyer is just really on some other nonsense. It's completely ridiculous. And they had his $350,000 bail reduced by a judge who said he saw no evidence the man was a danger to kids. That's insane to me. That's completely nuts to me. But let's go ahead. So that's June 1st, 1989, right? And it says that he faces 3 years if he is convicted. But if you see right here, this is the exact same district, that website that I showed on the last stream, where they were advertising the camp. That's the exact same school district. Okay. So moving on, and it mentions right here that Smith is the target of an FBI child pornography investigation originating in LA, and federal charges are anticipated against him. Moving down here. Another article cites Smith as an amateur photographer who photographed children at school events. Police also discovered yearbooks with codes marked over some of the students' pictures. Police were tight-lipped when parents started asking questions. And yeah, it's, I don't understand how the parents weren't completely losing their minds, because they were asking, if there was any illicit involvement with North Shore children, that the parents had been calling the district. It's but of course, this is a big money line. So right here, during the trial, it was revealed much of the material included children under the age of 10. Authorities also found Smith's name in a Texas warehouse raid where 2 tons of CSAM were seized. 2 tons. In one letter, Smith claimed at that time he had been a buyer for 5 years. And right here, this is Friday, August 4th, 1989, the Daily Herald, again highlighting former school bus driver in the North Shore District. The kids were under 10, and he became the target of this investigation after agents learned that sexually explicit material from a company in Portugal, which was already under investigation for child pornography, had been sent to his home. And in regards to the letter that they found in the Texas raid, it said that at the time he claimed ownership of 650 slides of hardcore sexual activity involving children. So this guy's a real piece of shit. And right here, Smith was found guilty, and his lawyer decried the verdict as a violation of his client's First Amendment rights. The argument was that mere possession and duplication of the material didn't exploit any children. Sunday, August 6th, from the Olympian. And right there. So his attorney said that the child pornography law unconstitutionally infringes on his First Amendment rights and his rights of privacy. And again, he had not exploited any children by possessing and duplicating the material. Okay, whatever you guys say. People love pulling that First Amendment card, don't they, huh? Now, right here. Back to the Texas connection. I was attempting to locate the raid, go all the way back to 1970, and was coming up dry. Enter Eye of the Chicken Hawk. That is the cover of the book. And again, cannot recommend it more if you want to actually look at this topic seriously. Letter correspondence was seized in 1973 by U.S. postal inspectors between Roy Ames and Roger D. Smith regarding the sale of hardcore bondage CSAM. Smith had written that a particular film would have been better if the producers tossed in a stiff 14-year-old. And there it is again, right here. Roger D. Smith, this is the same person. Sorry. It's there's no argument here with me. This is a direct connection. The timeline completely tracks. And moving on, I've admittedly yet to finish the book, so I went digging into Roy Ames. In 1975, he was sent to prison after photographs of 11 Houston area victims of the mass murders were seized following the arrest and murder convictions of Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. and David Owen Brooks. And right there, so Clifton or Ames was convicted in 1975 of using the mail to distribute obscene material. All right, so who are these 2 gentlemen? Elmer Wayne Henley Jr. is in prison for his role as a participant in a series of murders known as the Houston Mass Murders, in which a minimum of 28 teenage boys and young men were abducted, tortured, raped, and murdered by Dean Corll between 1970 and 1973. And right here, David Owen Brooks, the fellow accomplice, died in May of 2020 in prison from COVID complications. Roy Clifton Ames was accused by a former child star who refused to identify themselves on the record as being given to Ames by his father after his father raped him at the age of 11. The victim's father has been photographed with governors and other nationally prominent figures. And right there, it says that the authorities did confirm this. And up here, so in 1975, 6.5 tons of pornographic magazines and films, and most importantly, Ames's international mailing list of 10,000 names. The young man's father, he was also arrested in connection with the Empire, but family influence was able to keep his name out of the newspapers. Charges against the father were later dropped. And right here, I'm worried if I click on it, it's going to screw us all up. Yeah, it is. Okay, so right here, this is the Tampa Tribune, but I think it was, see, I knew it was going to do that. Hold on, hold please. Right here. All right, I'm just going to do that. So someone, and I believe it was the gardener, said that James Jimmy Boots Rothstein made up the term chicken hawk. That's not true. That's not true at all. So right here, continuing, charges were dropped against the father, which bolsters the argument that Ames and Norman, both boasting a client Rolodex in the tens of thousands each, has serious blackmail. As with Norman, Ames was able to continue operations in the Houston area with little hindrance. This is 1981. Again, facing kid porn charges, right? So he was trying to sell master copies to federal agents when he got busted. Something else to consider is a parallel regarding the entertainment industry. Michael Thevis of Atlanta, Wayne Williams' boss, had the GRC and Peachtree Empire. Ames had home cooking records and was described as a notorious producer and thief in the Texas blues scene in the 1960s. And that is his record label. There are repeated themes within these networks, and I'm certain when I finish The Eye of the Chicken Hawk, I'll think that this thread is stupid. However, the ties between Dean Corll, John Wayne Gacy, John Norman, and Roy Ames seem well established despite those client lists being destroyed. So no, I won't stop looking into Bothell anytime soon. Smith's lawyer said he resided there for over 20 years when he was found guilty. His letter was discovered in the Texas raid in 73. I haven't looked further back than the trial referenced here. And me thanking my homies for helping me find this. But for those who are unfamiliar, that is one of John Norman's operations, the Odyssey Foundation. And that is something that he was allowed to print and mail from prison. From prison. Yeah. These networks are highly protected, but that is the connection that we have directly to the exact same, school district, let alone the town, the school district of Bothell. And again, people want to sit there and cherry pick stuff or call me QAnon or whatever. I understand that some of this stuff gets drug out and I may not present it very well, but I'm doing my best. And if you're going to be intellectually honest about trying to discredit me, at least use all of the information that I've put out here, right? Because Barry Bader's a real person. He's not an illusion. He's certainly not a ghost. And I am almost done doing a family history on him, and it's very fascinating. I need to wet my whistle, but it would look like, because you guys know that I'm a really big history nerd, it would seem that Dad was maybe involved in the space program in 1947. He graduated from this really weird space school. So that might explain why Barry Bader's really hard to find, but we're going to come here and we're going to go through all of that because it's very extensive and it's very fascinating to me. But let's go ahead because this is long. This committee hearing is long. It's 102 pages. I don't know if we're going to read every single thing. And obviously, if my sound gets, wacky or if everything gets really choppy, let me know and I'll stop and we'll try again. We'll come back because obviously, the internet hates me. But I have not seen this before. This does not come up in Google. And the person that sent this to me, the original link that they sent, it was gone within 24 hours. It's not that I'm paranoid. These are just the things that happen. They already backed it up, so I've already backed it up twice. Because there is some illuminating information in here. Obviously, this is going to focus on, it's going to focus on a couple states. Let's just go ahead and get into it. So, right here, before the New York State Select Committee on Crime, its causes, control, and effect on society in the matter of a public hearing to consider the boy prostitution and pornography. This is July 26, 1982. And there we go. Now, there is some handwritten notes on here, okay? I don't know whose personal library this came from because it does look like it came from a personal library. But let's just go ahead and start, right here where they're enacting the law. So on July 2nd of this year, the Supreme Court of the U.S. upheld the Marino-Lasher child pornography law enacted in New York State to prevent the sexual abuse of children and their commercial exploitation. The court rendered its decision in response to the Ferber challenge involving the sale of published materials depicting underage boys engaged in sexual performances. Unchallenged were sections of law addressing the performances themselves. Since 1977, public policy without interruption has prohibited the employment of children for sexual purposes. Yet in New York, the law appears to have had little effect in controlling the traffic in child flesh, especially that involving young boys used for homosexual purposes. They are known to be employed as sex performers, as models for pornographic films and photos, as prostitutes encouraged to ply their trade in gay bars, movie and burlesque houses, exchanged like merchandise by organizations, and pederasts for the purposes of lewd exhibition, molestation, intercourse, sodomy, and sadomasochistic abuse. I highlighted that particularly because when we're thinking about John Norman, John Wayne Gacy, Dean Corll, because for those that didn't know, that's where that's where those kids came from in Gacy's house and all that shit that they found out in Texas with Dean Corll. Surprise, it's not what the propaganda stuff tells you. These weren't random serial killers. Moving on. It is clear that children do not initiate or control this type of commerce. Adults do. Who are they, and how do they operate out of the reach of the law? How widespread is the traffic in children? What are the problems the law enforcement community had in prosecuting criminally involved adults? And what can we do to control this multi-million-dollar industry? In seeking answers to these questions, I want to emphasize that this committee is not here addressing the larger questions of obscenity or censorship involving the sensibilities of the community, but rather the depraved use of children that often leads to permanent psychological and physical damage. Our first witnesses will be Corll Schoeffler and Ann Fisher, both detectives from Washington, D.C. And I'm not going to sit here and, read every single thing. So they're asking, okay, this is who you are. Or are you okay with having your picture taken? Where did you work? How long did you work there? This is Metropolitan PD, Juvenile Prostitution Division, 1979, the Youth Division, the Sex Squad. So these people know what they're talking about because they've seen a lot of this. But right here, from Detective Fisher. Basically, in Washington, under the Youth Division, the Juvenile Prostitution Unit assignment was to go out into the city, both in the street, in the club, in the bookstores, find where juveniles were being used either for pornography or for prostitution, investigate how they came into the city, who brought them into the city, how widespread the problem was, and perhaps where they came from, why they were sent to Washington. And they asked, could you give us some idea of your background in the area of juvenile prostitution and pornography? So the other detective. For approximately the past 10 years, I have been an organized crime investigator with the Metropolitan PD, and approximately 75 or 76, we began to examine organized crime's relationship to the pornography industry. I'm going to stop for 2 seconds to reiterate something, especially for the meatballs and the cops, especially the New York cops that like to argue with me on Twitter. The mafia does not have morals. The mafia does not have ethics. And the mafia would never hurt women or children. Oh, except for pornography, right? Except for pornography. Yeah, because the mafia is involved in all of this. So I don't want to hear it, this Hollywood bullshit about the mafia had morals and they're gone because the TV told you so. Not doing it. Now, right here it says, were you connected with the project that developed intelligence on the involvement of organized crime in the pornography industry? She says, yes. They ask, can you give us some idea of what that entailed? As a result of law enforcement and media contentions that organized crime, particularly the traditional organized crime, the mafia, or whatever name it's used, the contention was that they controlled the pornography industry, and in examining the basis for this, we found that it lacked a lot of documentation. So as a result of an area of the law enforcement intelligence meeting, we decided to determine the validity of these allegations. We hoped that we could produce some documentation that would not only answer that question, but also in matters with regards to pornography, child pornography, etc. It seemed to be a low priority type prosecution, and we hoped that if our document did produce documentation of organized crime's involvement, that it would assist prosecutors and other police departments in viewing what was going on in their communities. Because generally, if it's a dirty bookstore or something like that, and you don't have any idea that there's a connection to, say, organized crime or something like that, it receives a low priority investigation. That's essentially what we tried to do then. The methodology that we employed, we devised some questions that we felt if answered from public record, the answers to what we were after would be there. So, across the country, local law enforcement provided answers to the questionnaires that we sent out after 2 meetings that we had. And as a result of the questionnaires that were answered, again, the great majority of that material came from public records in those jurisdictions. We were able to produce a document which you have. And it says, is this document organized crime's involvement in the pornography industry? Yep. And this was the product of how many years of work? Approximately a year and a half of accumulating the facts, but some of the investigations in the past had been in other files over years. And there we go. They're deeming it as evidence. And it says, can you tell us from your knowledge and in this investigation the significance that New York has in the network of pornography that is controlled by organized crime? Well, as the book will illustrate, we were able to determine that information pertaining to organized crime's involvement generally led to corporations or individuals within New York. Yeah, let's think about DiBernardo, Thieves, all that stuff with the deuce, right? This is real life. This is the facts as they are. The largest distributor of pornographic material that law enforcement and the media called organized crime was a company here in New York. The largest, quote, mafia figure involved in the pornography industry in the country at the time of that study was Michael Zaffarano, who has been identified as a member of organized crime. Who's now deceased? Yes. What were the companies? You mentioned that 2 of them were in New York City. The main company in New York City was Star Distributors. There's DiBernardo. And yeah, they were producing CSAM. And so right here asking about the addresses on Lafayette Street, and it says, did your studies also go into the area of juvenile crime and the use of children for pornographic purposes? Yes. Was organized crime involved in the distribution of that sort of material? For the most part, what we found out there was that organized crime, while there are instances where organized crime did benefit from the distribution of this material, for the most part, it appeared to be a group of collectors who would trade material and trade male prostitutes back and forth. We weren't able to really successfully document organized crime as running the day-to-day activity as regards child prostitution. No. And it says, can you see a correlation between juvenile prostitution and juvenile pornography? Yes, very much so. Normally, the individuals that we would pick up or bring into police custody or question regarding their activities were brought into the area of prostitution or pornography almost simultaneously. They did both, alternating. They usually were from different sections of the country, runaways, people who were maybe leaving various organizations they had been placed into by a state. Yeah, let's keep that in mind, okay? And once they got into the city and once they were used in both of these areas. By the same procurer? Yes. Did you see evidence of networks more than just an individual procurer operating in this area? Was there evidence of an organization at work? Yes. Now, we found this both with juvenile prostitution involving girls and juvenile prostitution or pedophilia involving boys. Do you want me to address both? He says, yes. I'm going to wet my whistle really quick. Hold on, guys. Yes, I am live. Someone asked in the chat. I just saw that. I don't know why that's a question that stuck out to me. I am live. Hopefully it's not incredibly laggy. So, back in 77 and 78, we discovered down 14th and K Street, which is the center of Washington Northeast, an area where there were a lot of young ladies that were being brought in from California. This is making me think of Laurel Canyon. Just my opinion. Investigation was done on this, and there was found to be what they called the California Connection. It was a group of pimps that had gotten together, and basically they would transport these girls between DC and California. Juveniles were being used in this business, so to speak, and they were being switched back and forth. When it got too hot in one area for them, they were sent back to another. As far as the pedophilia or the use of young boys, we had a connection in Houston, and we were able to find out that there was a definite circuit which encompassed Houston, Los Angeles, San Francisco, New Orleans, New York, and Washington. And these boys worked the circuit and they went from one city to another. In fact, some of our sources in Houston were able to give us phone numbers that the boys in Houston had for areas in Washington where they could call a specific number and a young boy would be provided as a call service. In this respect, we found that it was an organized circuit. It was controlled by people. You could call a phone number in Houston from Washington and have a young boy delivered to your room in Washington using an American Express card or another business card to a charge account. And they asked to whom was it charged? Was it a hotel charge? What we found is there would be fronts. Hold, please. For every single person that has called me a stupid conspiracy theorist, excuse my French, fuck you. Fuck you. Okay, let's go ahead and get back to it. Sorry, had to get that out. Moving on. I am certain that the major credit card companies didn't have any idea that and he says, I'm not interested in the major credit card companies or casting dispersions. They said, but if a credit card was used, it had to be charged to some specific account. And that is the question that they're addressing. So you can see right here, the really light highlighter, that's the person who highlighted this before they scanned it in. The individual who could procure that service. We are not in a position to give you names at this time, but the people who would procure that service would use their cards. And so Senator Bernstein says, in other words, the people that supplied these young boys and young girls had a credit account with some of the major credit card companies. Yep. And they would charge and then collect from these credit card companies under various guises, like being photography studios or bookstores, models, model agencies. Yeah. Okay. All of this, tell me it doesn't track with everything that we know thus far. Now he says, now without revealing any names at the moment, did you ascertain names and addresses of the accounts, these firms that were using the charge accounts? And she says yes, but just clarifying that they are not going into detail on it. And saying that this was the trend of technique that was being used, right? So right here, after you ascertained that credit cards were being used, did the police ever notify any of the credit card companies? In instances in our jurisdiction, in PG County, Montgomery County, Virginia, Northern Virginia, and in Washington, D.C., several sex industry operations that utilized credit cards in that fashion, we did notify the credit card companies. And to my knowledge at this time, where it could be specifically proven that the cards were being misused in that fashion, the credit card companies took appropriate action. What was the reception to your notification? What was the attitude of the credit card companies? I could characterize that in a general term that it was one of agreement with our position. Senator Bernstein. So you can characterize this also as sex on credit. Yeah. Yep. So right here, these intercity networks in the pedophiliac area, would they send the children around or was it like a central place? I am trying to get the idea. Is it a loose confederation or did it seem more structured and organized? And Detective Fisher said, I would have to say sort of a combination of both, in that the youngster could stay in one area, let's say as long as he wanted to, but if things were getting to the point where the police were starting to harass him, or there was a possibility that the operation, which was covert at that time, would also be exposed, then they would be sent somewhere else. It wasn't a regimented type of thing where you spend a certain amount of time in one area, then went on. But there was a control. There were numbers. There were people that you would contact in each city when you went to that city. And this was made known to these young boys. Okay, most of these young boys, I think it should be added also, were runaways. And they would start at the age of 12 or 13, and they would work this circuit and they would go from town to town. And let's say by the time they were 18, they would have probably encompassed the whole circuit a couple of times. Is there any evidence of forcing these youngsters? I think it is a point where in different ones that were interviewed at the time that they ran away from home, let's say they come to a city like New York or California. They have no funds. They are vulnerable. They are opened up into this. After they get into it, they don't like it, but they can't see a way out. They'll all tell you the money is good. They don't like what they're doing, but they don't want to go back home because they don't want to face their peer group. They don't want to face their parents. They don't want to face the pressure that will be put on them, so they stay. And in that way, there is coercion. Senator Bernstein, would you then conclude or assume that these who had been using them did not put pressures on them or force them to engage in these activities? I think Detective Fisher gives a very interesting insight here. I think it's almost like if you get into this area of mind control. You take someone, you get them out of their normal society, and you bring them into this area. Perhaps you start coming down on them a little hard, and then you treat them with niceness, and you have them basically sucked into you. They might want to get away, but they can't get away because they see no alternative. And that's a form of coercion, even if it's not a strict, harsh coercion. It's a mental coercion. I agree with him completely. And along the same lines, in conjunction with your investigation, did you ascertain whether any of these kids were involved in the use of narcotics? And he said, yes. I would find that basically this ran concurrent with the prostitution and the pornography. They were, a lot of times, the younger ones especially, were placed on drugs to keep them under the control of the people. So then, in effect, there was a pressure of the supply of drugs, which these kids would need in order to keep them in line, so to speak. Detective Fisher, initially, and then once they got them hooked onto it, then it was a voluntary thing with them, as far as I know. That is similar with prostitution with girls, too, isn't it? And he says, yes, that is correct. And right here, so this is something, again, that the owner of this document highlighted. He says, I may add a comment if you don't mind. I have interviewed people, and I'm certain the other detective, Ann, has too, in which they'll tell you that they don't go to law enforcement because they have been told they will receive bodily harm or be killed. I mean, they are told as part of the operation not to talk to the police. I want people to read that as many times as they need to and beat it into their skull. Because this is back in 82? Their investigation started in the 70s. This is why these things are not obvious to people, and this is why everybody chalks this up to QAnon stuff. So, Senator Marino, did you ever encounter any list of clients for these youngsters? Were you ever able to secure a list of clients? On a number of occasions, we have been able to, as a result of raids on alcohol services, both male prostitution and female, simply because of using credit cards and for security reasons. They do maintain lists, and we have seized numerous times. We haven't seized list per se. We've seized card index 3x5 cards with names and statistics or data on the clients, yes. For those that are familiar with John Norman, John Wayne Gacy, Dean Corll, that network, it was over 10,000? Yeah. And somehow those lists get destroyed, right? So right here, were you ever able to pinpoint places where the actual prostitution took place or the pornography was being filmed? Were you ever able to actually find the locale or site where these activities were taking place? And he says, when you talk about juvenile prostitution, traditional law enforcement methodology is handicapped in terms of investigating these allegations. If you are investigating narcotics or if you're investigating robbery or something like that, you can get informants. You can put them in the organization. You can get the facts that you need. But when you're dealing with a situation that involves a juvenile, it's very hard. You can't. You cannot take a juvenile and place them into a ring that's making movies or utilizing his services because you're just as wrong as what you are trying to address. So law enforcement is really in a position there where it can't answer a lot of questions that I'm sure you would want answers to. We can only guess from interviews of other people who eventually talk to us as to how it goes on and what happens. There have been rare occasions in our metropolitan area where we have been able to identify where children have been filmed or things like that. But it is usually after the fact. And let's go ahead and see. Okay, so Senator Bernstein asks, what happens to them when they reach the age of, let's say, 18? And he says they have already sort of got themselves on a road to crime. The older they get in male prostitution and in female prostitution, the less their demand in most cases. And it's like anything else. If you set out in life to have a profession and then all of a sudden you don't, and they are into narcotics, the seedier aspects of society, and they end up, a number of the ones that I am familiar with, end up committing larceny, crimes of that nature. They gyrate into extortion rings where they set up males, say male prostitution. They set them up and pretend to be policemen and shake them down and things like that. They just end up in that same atmosphere, but on another side of it. We have also had information that we really haven't been able to verify that some of them have been killed. We've had things that have been reported to us by confidential sources that such and such a person was killed. The person never showed up again and the body was never found. So that leaves conjecture there as to whether it did or not. And that's the problem in general, because when you were talking about juvenile runaways, law enforcement is not in a position where it has the means of computerizing where these kids are and where they turn up. If they turn up in California and they're missing in New York, it's a hit or miss if you can find the New York place where they belong with their family. I think law enforcement is just in a position not to really ever find out what happened to these kids. Yeah, these are detectives and senators having this conversation back in the early 80s. So there you go. There's your answers. Law enforcement is just not in a position to really ever find out what happens to missing kids. You find out in instances where, like in Chicago, in Texas, where there are 27 or 30 bodies found in a basement of a house, all right? That's generally one of the ways you find out. It's too late. So here is additional documentation from government officials confirming what I have been talking about, and obviously in my schizo clip. Yeah? Because that's what it is. Shit pisses me off. Do they also become pimps as they grow older? I know of a few people that have been in that profession who have ended up with one or two people that they put on the street. But for the most part, Detective Schofler cannot really determine that. And right here, asking about a operator named William Oates and what operations he was running in Washington. That is someone that I am going to be coming back to because he is a very interesting character, and I'm not really going to get too deep into it here today. And it says right here, and was there any indications developed by the Washington police that there was some sort of extortion being practiced in this type of industry? In the industry in general? Yes, sir. Yeah, and with regards to any places that Mr. Oates was involved with, was there any evidence that films were being taken of the customers? No, there wasn't any evidence, but there were allegations and indications. By indications, were there, rooms, etc., with setups for making films? I think the incident you're talking about can't be directly attributed to Mr. Oates, but was it in the business he was? Yes, involved with. Yes, there were one-way mirrors in the room for the customers. Have there been any reported cases or complaints to the police of extortion or blackmail? With regards to his conduct, we arrested a ring about 2.5 years ago, and again, almost by accident, that in fact set up a sophisticated system where they would offer a young looking male to a person desiring sex with males, and then they would run into the room, the older members of the ring, identifying themselves as police, and naturally the client would try to pay his way out of it, and this ring was fairly successful until they met a person who didn't want to pay. For the most part, when we looked through records that operation entailed, most of the victims, you could tell from their profession and all, weren't going to be complainants. Yeah, I bet. When you find a juvenile or somebody under the age of 16 who tells you that they have been into prostitution or pornography, are there places in the metropolitan Washington area that the police can lodge them? What do you do with them other than arrest them? And this is also very important that I would like people to keep in mind. There really are no facilities. We have a court system as such that if a young person is picked up and brought into court, let's say that they are in an area where prostitution is rampant, they are brought in as underage. They probably could be charged fugitive from parent, or what we call PINS, child in need of supervision. They're referred to the court. The court usually just sends them back home, or there are detention centers in the district. But as far as social facilities available, no. New York has the same problem. That seems to be common throughout this situation. And right here, he says, I would assume that the detention centers are similar to those in New York, where it merely aggravates the problem is their places. as the basic reason for the detention in the first place, right? So clarifying that it's just making the situation worse. It's not resolving anything. They're placed with individuals who are charged with criminal acts. It's not a good situation. And you find as a result that they become more acclimated to criminal acts, to sexual deviations, and everything that goes along with it. And right here he says, is there at this present time any kind of intelligence network among law enforcement dealing with child prostitution or child pornography? At the local law enforcement level, there is an informal communications network where information is exchanged. Is that because you happen to know somebody? You can call them on the phone and vice versa. Exactly. But there's no formal mechanism that you can plug into for assistance or intelligence when you find somebody from out of town working in your area. Not that I'm aware of. No. Now, really quick, because I just thought of it. Hopefully, I'm still here with you guys and we're still moving and grooving. I wish I would have had it pulled up. Okay, so this is 1982, right? I'm going to show you guys something. Because I'm going to show people how much the government, these people, don't care. And I'm not talking about the detectives or the senator in particular, but I'm talking about the people that actually hold the purse strings. Okay, I'm going to show you this thing that I found this morning. They don't have a centralized list, right? That's what they're saying. They don't have that technology. But guess who did? Michael Thievis, which means DiBernardo did too. So this was something that I found in his FBI file. And this is from the 70s. But obviously the same is redacted. This is talking about his legitimate business filings, that all of the mail order customer lists are maintained at an IBM location, and if necessary, he could obtain through his IBM records the name of the individuals asking for orders to be filled through the mail from Washington, D.C. Seems IBM's technology came in handy to organize clientele lists for the mafia's human trafficking empire. Yeah? So, see what I mean when I say that the government is run by serial killers and pedophiles, and if they're, Satanists, that's remains to be seen, right? But I just want people to understand the actual facts of the situation, because these are the facts as they are. You can't change history, you can't rewrite it, and you sure as shit can't give me grief when you don't know what you're talking about, right? So, what would you like to see in place for juveniles involved in pornography? Assuming that there will be sufficient funding for them, right? So that's a lot of assumptions, huh? I think the first thing is the public, the legislative branch, the media, all have to recognize that there definitely is a problem. And I think right now, they don't really realize the magnitude of the problem. I think that legislature has to pass laws that make it more feasible and easier for law enforcement to get into this type of investigation and be able to do something. We have to educate police officers to know what they are looking for. You have to educate the public to know what they are looking for. Put some concentration so intelligence networks cannot get to just the boy on the street who's the prostitute or the girl on the street, but get to the organization behind it. I think it's going to take a unity of all those elements working together, and one can't do it alone. And as long as you don't have that unity, you are going to have areas where it's always going to fall through. And they asked for specific recommendations for legislative enactment. And Detective Fisher gives an example. In the district, we've had cases where young boys or girls are seen downtown in an area where prostitution is going on, and we are getting a lot more street activity now along that area in the district involving young boys. The law states that unless you actually get them in the act of prostitution, you just can't go down there and pick them up. Right there, you sort of have to walk by and close your eyes. I know one of the other jurisdictions in our area is trying to get some type of legislation through that would make it possible, if you see a pimp or you see someone that you know to be involved in this type of activity, take a young boy to a certain area and drop him off. Right there, you have enough to pick both of them up. You have enough to start. But right now, you have to have so much legally before you can do anything that it's very hard. And he's asking clarification. Would you advocate that the police officer, if he sees someone whom he suspects of being either a juvenile for sex or a pimp just on the basis of his belief, would you recommend that the police officer have the right to arrest him? And as far as arrest, no, but to pick him up and to bring him in. And he says, what's the difference between them? And let me see right here. Okay, so clarification. When you have a situation where it's known prostitution area, common sense, anybody, the media, citizens, anyone could recognize the conditions. When you have a situation where you have a 16-year-old or 15-year-old or 14-year-old all painted up, standing on a corner in conversations with passing vehicles and pedestrians, all right? When a police officer has probable cause to believe that that person is engaged in, and he interrupts again, and he says, what is a probable cause? Again, the probable cause would be 2 o'clock in the morning in that area that is totally dedicated to the service of prostitution. I don't know certain jurisdictions. I can certainly say for Washington, D.C., that we have an area like that. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, when one is standing on the corner yelling into passing vehicles and approaching pedestrians and engaging them in conversations regarding sex or whatever, that a police officer, feeling that that person is a juvenile, should have. I think society would recognize that he should be permitted to approach the person and question that person with regard to his age, where he's from, and some means of verifying it. And if those questions aren't answered, I think that should be right there probable cause for a law enforcement officer to take the person to the juvenile authorities and let the court handle it. And they ask, when you say painted up, what do you mean? Lipstick? Yes, lipstick, mini dresses, earrings, and continuing on. Assuming the facts as you've given them and that the individual who was questioned does not respond satisfactorily, at least to the satisfaction of the police officer, what do they do? So again, I think it goes back to this. Does society want to condone activity, or does it want to address it? If it wants to address it, then the only way it can address it is 1, the courts have got to be responsible. 2, the citizens have got to want it. And the only way that they're going to want it is if they know what's going on. And legislators have to recognize it. And in hand with that, they've got to make certain concessions. And those concessions, I believe, have to let somebody make the discretionary call. I could not agree with this detective more. So right here. I understand what you are saying, and in effect, one of the things you are saying to us is that we in the legislature have to change the attitudes and perspectives of society. And that is something that we cannot do because you cannot legislate morality. But what is, given the state of facts, you say the legislature should enact legislation to help stop this, stem it out. What does the police officer do? Does he arrest him? And if he does arrest him, what does he charge him with other than disorderly conduct? And he says, I think what you've demonstrated is an example of disorderly conduct, yelling at automobiles, and so forth. And again, because they're really putting this detective through the ringer. I apologize if I left you with this feeling that I meant legislators or police should attempt to alter the perceptions of sexual misconduct in the minds of the public. I don't mean that at all. I mean that the basic citizen, for the most part, does not even recognize that there is a problem. Even in my community, if you were not in certain sections of the town and asked them if they knew that kids were on the corner selling their bodies, they wouldn't even know that. And I think that's a responsibility of legislators and the police and the media to let people know that the condition exists, because once they know it exists, they'll support you in an effort to address it. And if they don't want to support you, then I think law enforcement is off base in trying. And again, I completely concur. I don't want to belabor too much. Okay. Yep. So not changing the morals of society. We've got it, right? So I'm not going to sit here, and this is a lot of semantics. And I hope that people that are looking at the screen and seeing some of this, it's so much back and forth BS. And it's just like, get to the point. You know, they're really just running these two detectives through a bunch of, I'm sorry, verbal legal beagle bullshit, in my personal opinion. Excuse my French. So let's keep going. You know, they're comparing this to somebody robbing a 7-Eleven, right? Blah, 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 blah. Let's go ahead and keep moving. You know what? Let me stop this and find the next page because we're almost halfway through it and I don't want to completely ignore the chat, but because they're doing a lot of repeat stuff about the runaways. So, un momento, let me skip because I don't want to like just read the stuff that I highlighted, right? Because I do think that a lot of this is important. And I also think it's important for people to see that there are people that care and that there were people that care, right? And there are, individuals in positions of authority. Obviously, the degrees of power vary, but that there are and were people trying to do something. But see how many hoops they have to go through? I mean, I think it's completely ridiculous. Yeah, we'll leave it right there because they're going to touch on the cowboy ring. All right, let me. Oh, am I getting laggy? Is it happening? Is it happening? Is the audio okay? Somebody let me know if the audio is okay. I totally thought that like the Wi-Fi was smooth. And if it's not, you guys better tell me. Someone better let me know while I wet my whistle. I think my French is very good. Well, thank you. Oui, oui. Thank you. Goodness. Seems great now. Don't jinx me. Don't jinx me. I robbed a 2x4 off of the side of the road. It's okay. The audio's choppy. I hate that. Does someone know how to like remotely fix my computer? Yeah, because that would be great. Because I just have given up. I'm sorry. I'm just taking a break for a second, guys. Like my eyes hurt. Give me a moment. Thank you guys. I appreciate you. As long as the Wi-Fi is, or not the Wi-Fi, as long as the audio is good. That's all I really care about. My face, who cares? Whatever. People are going to sit there and make fun of how I look anyway. I'm going to have to put up my glasses. It lagged, it bounced back. Okay. Thank you. Gracias. Mucho gracias. Just so people understand, like, I don't like talking about these topics. I'm not, I'm not, what is it? Like a masochist where like I enjoy torturing myself. It's just this is something that's really important to me. And I think that this committee hearing provides some really good insight and has some banging leads. Because eventually, like I said, we're going to give Jimmy Boots his flowers. And we're going to talk about some lesser known names that are involved in these networks. Because, I mean, this ties into everything. This just completely demolishes, in my opinion, the whole like lone nut serial killer theory, honestly. From Manson to Bundy, all of it. Once people figure out that this is like a big blackmail porno racket, I mean, some of you guys already know, but let me wet my whistle one more time. Okay, let's continue. I don't think we're going to get through the whole thing, but let's get back into it. Thank you guys for your patience. So, right here, one last question. You've had occasion, I take it, to invest the callboy services in Washington, D.C. Yeah, people forget that there was stuff going on before the Franklin scandal, right? In the course of those investigations, did you obtain the assistance of an investigator by the name of Dale Smith? Yes. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Okay, and now here we have Dale Smith, right? So in 1977, did you work for the Select Committee on Crime as an investigator? Yes, I worked as a staff investigator and research analyst in 77 and 78. What was his area of research? Was juvenile prostitution and pornography in New York. In 1977, did you assist the New York City Police Department in making an arrest of a juvenile call service operator? In 77 or 78. Who was that? That was Mr. Paul Abrams, which dude is next level. Mr. Abrams was running a call service that was being operated from the west side of New York, and it was for male prostitution. Did Mr. Abrams use children? in that service? Yes, he did. And Mr. Abrams was arrested. Mr. Abrams was arrested. Do you know what the disposition of the case was? He pleaded guilty and received probation. What was the charge? Prostitution. Prostitution is a felony and promoting prostitution. After this period of time with the committee, did you leave New York City? He said he worked with the Policy Sciences Center. That was an investigation of organized crime. Yes, it was under Dr. Rubenstein, and then I left for Washington. He returned in early 1982, and the purpose is that he was employed by the committee again as a staff investigator to update the material developed during the 77 to 78 investigation on child prostitution and pornography. Did you go back and look at the operations you had observed in the previous years? And they ask, can you tell us what you saw and where? I had made a survey of all the locations that we had targeted in the 77 and 78 investigation. I had also visited places that had opened since the 78 investigation, including a bar on the Upper East Side by the name of Dallas and the Follies Theater. The Follies Theater is on 48th Street on the west side near the Minnesota Strip. The Deuce, anyone? And Dallas is on 53rd Street near 2nd Avenue. And they ask, what did you observe? Dallas was primarily a homosexual prostitution bar that was well known for underage kids. I was able to cite kids between the ages of 13, 14, 15, and 16 years old working directly out of the bar. There was also indications that a call service was being operated in some way connected with the bar. Can you tell us how the service operated? Did you observe? He did. Right here, the call service, the calls would come into another location and from sources in the bar that were working. Some of the juveniles were talking. The calls would be called into the bar. The boys would be waiting at the bar for their pickups, and a limousine was signaled, picking up the children and taking them to their calls. What did you observe at Follies? There were live sex shows involving underage kids. The performers in the live sex shows were available for prostitution before, in between, and after the performances. Interviewing some of the performers and some of the patrons, there were reports that child porno films were being filmed in the Follies Theater. These reports were similar to the ones that have circulated around that operation, the operation in Washington. And he says, do you remember who it was, or were you able to determine who it was that was running or managing the Follies Theater? And the name that we're seeing again, William Oates. Did he have any operations going on in Washington? He did. The Cinema Follies in Washington and an operation in Pittsburgh. The best of both worlds. And he said all three of the operations were pornographic film and burlesque houses involving live stage performances by dancers who were also prostitutes. Some of the boys, not all of them, but some of them were underage. Now, with this operation, one of the things that was uncovered is a circuit where the kids are being transported from by Oates' operation between Florida. I mean, between New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania. They would work, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks, whatever, in Washington and go from Washington to New York. From New York, they'll work a few weeks in New York, and then they'll be transported to Pennsylvania or to Pittsburgh. Were you ever invited to participate in any child pornographic films while you were in New York? No. Was there any other place you visited in your investigation earlier this year that appeared to be involved with child prostitution? Yes, quite a few. Is there a bar called the Haymarket? Yes. And what did you observe? On 8th Avenue and approximately between 47th and 48th Street. So right here, what he observed, it's basically a male prostitution bar. There are many underage youths there. One of the things that was observed at the Haymarket is a procurer. A very well-known New York procurer was working behind the bar. This person has been known to the committee for a number of years as providing underage boys to the pornography and prostitution industry, and were boys working in the bar. And by working, I mean they were soliciting customers. They were soliciting. Did there come a time this year when you went to Florida? And he says, yes, he was on assignment in Fort Lauderdale on a project involving juvenile prostitution. And did the Florida investigation reveal contacts back to New York? Yes, it did. Yep. The targets in Florida were there was a hotel in Florida in Fort Lauderdale that they had received reports in 77 and 78 concerning possible connections into organized crime in New York and also connected with the juvenile pornography and prostitution industry. There is also a magazine that was being published in South Florida that was reported to be controlled by organized crime that also had ties to New York. Yep. And let's see, this was developed from interviews of the people involved in these operations. Yes, some of them were juveniles. And they are asking what the names of the magazines are. One was called Blue Boy. The hotel involved there was the Marlin Beach Hotel. Can you give us an idea of how many boys were involved in this? And he says, we interviewed underage boys in all 3 bars of this hotel resort. Some of the boys interviewed were working for call services. They admitted to having been sent to New York and to Washington on calls that had originated in South Florida. Did there come a time when you were contacted by the Arlington Police in Virginia to assist them in an investigation of organized male prostitution rings? And he says, yes, I was contacted by Detective Chapman of the Arlington PD. And can you tell us the names concerning this investigation? And he says there were 2 male call services in Washington known as the Friendly Models and the Stables. Okay. This is something that we're going to see over and over again is these model agencies. The Bothell bus driver was a amateur photographer, right? I'm not saying that he had that as a front. I haven't dug that far yet, but these are trends that we see over and over. Let's continue. So right here, Friendly Models had already been raided, and the client list and everything had been seized by the police department. Very complete records were taken. As a result of my cooperation with the Arlington PD, they were able to obtain a warrant for the search and arrest of the Stables operation in Washington. The Stables operation was a male homosexual call service that, from reports over the past 3 years, appears to have been a final product of at least 1 local call service and 2 New York call services. The New York call services, in fact, I will have to go back a number of years there. In 76, there were 2 call services from New York that opened operations in Washington. These call services were operated out of New York. Now, around 78, call services merged, and the call services merged and then merged again into an operation that was already in existence called the Stables. Oh, things are rolling into one another? Oh my God, I've never heard of this before. Imagine that. Anyways, did you have occasion to get close to a principal involved in the Stables enough to talk to him about these operations? And he says the investigation he worked on in Washington, he was able to go undercover and interview the owner, one of the owners of the Stables call services. And they asked, was there anything concerning? Basically, this individual confirmed several vital pieces of information that I had received from other sources. He had also added that a lot of the money from the call services was being reinvested into real estate in the Washington area. I'm going to repeat that again. He had also added that a lot of the money from the call services was being reinvested into real estate in the Washington area. Did he discuss with you any sidelines that had become very profitable? The operator of this service, no. They ask about a Mr. Corll and what his function was in these operations. He was an accountant for several years of several call service operations in Washington. Did he discuss with you the profitability of these operations? Yes, he did. Did he tell you how they were making profits besides the call service itself? Yes. How were they doing that? And here we go. Through the sale of information on the sexual proclivities of the clients to agents of foreign intelligence services. Go back one more time. through the sale of information on the sexual proclivities of the clients to agents of foreign intelligence services. Beat it through your heads. Do whatever you got to do to cope with that. Because I've lost patience with all of this stuff. Were there any other call service operators that you were able to interview? Do you remember their names? Right here, Alexandria, Virginia, Jonathan Christopher Reynolds III. His call service, he had 2, was Fantasies Unlimited and Brian's Boys. Fucking hate these people, excuse my French. And was he also selling information out of the call services? And he says, yeah, absolutely. To who? To British and Israeli intelligence. Oh. Huh. Imagine that. Imagine that. Remember how I said that there's no stupid question besides asking for the Epstein client list? Take a mental screenshot of this in your brain, please. Okay? Because you're eventually going to have to, I guess we'll have to talk about like Hoover and his little cowboy ring or, little boy ring that was going on in California at some point. However, keep going. Did you have occasion to investigate in Washington a person by the name of William Oates? Boy, Willie just keeps on coming up, don't he? Did he have any operations in Washington? The Cinema Follies. And they ask him, again, the Cinema Follies, what is it? We scroll up here. A male homosexual pornographic film and burlesque house that involved live stage shows with boys, some of whom were under. The boys working for Mr. Oates were also male prostitutes available before, between, and after the shows. Did any of these boys discuss being involved in child pornographic movies? Yes, they did. Did you ever develop information as to what was done with these movies? Yes, at one time, sources indicated that Mr. Oates had been involved with operations in California. However, at the time of the spring investigation of this committee, at first it appeared that he had not any involvements with California pornography. But after interviewing employees for Mr. Oates and some of the male prostitutes who had worked in these films that were being filmed in Manhattan, it appeared that Mr. Oates was, in fact, still associated with these California organizations. Roman Polanski, anybody? Hello, Bueller, the Young Turks, all these other pederasts, right? Did you ever develop information as to any other intelligence services that were buying information? Foreign intelligence services? Yes. Which one was that? The Soviet military intelligence was named as one of the agencies or the foreign intelligence services that was purchasing information from the call services in Washington. Blackmail makes the world go round. Once people accept that, maybe people will realize the politics is fake and it's all based on who has better blackmail. Did you ever more or less confirm this on your own? He says, I don't know whether I had confirmed it to the satisfaction of the committee or not. And they said, were you satisfied? I was. Were you debriefed by someone who you thought was a foreign intelligence officer? He says, no, I was not personally debriefed by a foreign intelligence officer. Were you questioned? I have had contacts with foreign intelligence officers. When you were in New York, back to New York City, did you have occasion to purchase any magazines that seemed to be involved for soliciting or promoting juvenile prostitution? Yes, a number of magazines were purchased for the committee. One of the publications that we had looked at was Stars magazine from Washington, and it appeared to be a homosexual contact sheet with nationwide distribution. Did you ever see a magazine or purchase in New York a magazine named Laddie? Oh, wow. I've got to come back to Thevis's file because this just clicked in my head. That magazine is named there. Holy crap. Okay, sorry. I've got to take a screenshot in my brain. Hold, please. Oh, let me wet my whistle. I didn't realize I didn't see this before. Yeah, Thevis's file is like 900 pages. I'm about halfway through it, but I'm going to take a puff because that just kind of... Michael Thevis is such a scumbag. All right, so Can you describe what was the function of Laddie? Laddie appeared to be a publication primarily oriented to underage kids. I mean, primarily oriented to pederism. That is printed and distributed out of New York. Yes. When you were also with the committee, were you able to purchase child pornography in the Times Square area back in 77 and 78? Yes. And since then, it's more difficult when you tried in 1982. It was more difficult, but it was available. By being more difficult, do you mean the prices had gone up? He says no. At the time in 77 and 78, it was very easy to go out and purchase juvenile porn from just about anywhere along 42nd Street. When I came back in January and February of this year, it appeared to be a matter of knowing the right people. There were people, patrons of bars and clubs in New York that are oriented to pederasts that vouch that the trade still exists. They can, purchase. But you had to be known. Yes, you had to be known. Can you account for the change? And he says, I don't think that I can. And right here. In between, he asked the law. Sorry. And it says, Senator Marino, it had nothing to do with the bill I passed or the law that existed at that time. And he says, Senator, I've been out of New York for about 2 years. They decide to take a break, recess. There we go. So going back, they are going back to the Dallas bar. Is that still open? To my knowledge, it is. You observed that bar, correct? Yes. The bar was observed for 2 months on a regular basis. That means about every other or every third night. And you observed a pattern of these young kids in the bar. Yes. Now, looking at these young kids without knowing anything, could you ascertain or guess their approximate ages? Between the ages of 13 and 16. And on average, how many kids were in the bar? It varied. On a weekend night, there might be as many as 50 or 75 kids. Were they drinking? Not only drinking, they were drinking. However, in the back room of the Dallas bar, there was open drug usage. Who had access to the back room? Anyone who went into the bar. It was not an area that was privy to just a few people. It was open to the public. Did he have access? He did. And did he go to the back room? He did. Did he observe drug usage? Yes. And it was sales and usage. He said this area was basically a lounge that you would have. People would just go to and from the back room to smoke weed, to purchase cocaine or amphetamines. And yes, there was open usage. Do you know if anyone ever reported this to the state liquor authority? Not to my knowledge, but I didn't look into that matter. And he says, I was just wondering. Okay. So, did you ever at any time in the course of your observations notice any police on the premises? No, he didn't. Would you say that the use of the youngsters there or the frequenting of youngsters of that bar was common, notorious knowledge? Yes, it was. In fact, in nationally distributed homosexual gay guides, it's listed as specifically as a bar for underage kids. And I have found one of these magazines, and we will be talking about it eventually. Did it have a liquor license? I believe so. And you observe the bartenders or those behind the bars selling alcoholic beverages to these youngsters? Yes, I did. But in more cases, they would sell the alcoholic beverages to adult patrons who would buy drinks for the boys. The boys served two purposes, not only for prostitution, for prostituting themselves in the bar and drawing in customers, but they also generated more of a bar business by requiring the potential clients to buy them drinks. If I understood you correctly, on the call system for kids at the bar, someone desiring a youngster would call a certain telephone number which was away from the bar. Is that correct? He says, yes, it appeared so. That particular telephone number would then telephone the bar. He says, right. I had made contact with a call boy who had worked previously in Washington for Friendly Models, has been a source for me there, and he had introduced me to boys working for call service at Dallas Bar. And the boys were informed that a car was picking them up for a prostitution call by, he says, how was he informed? He was informed by the waiter at the Dallas Bar. And right here, the initial call went to point A in turn notified the bar now by telephone. Yes. They're asking, what type of phone it is. Is it private? Is it a public phone? And let's keep going. Sorry, guys, because some of this stuff is just... Now, this obviously is a valid question. This should be referred to the state liquor authority because certainly these acts are in violation of the alcoholic beverage control law. And the question is whether this place should continue to be licensed. In regards to narcotics, who sold whom? Were these youngsters buying or were these youngsters selling? And he says that it was both. It was selling and buying from the kids. And he says that the people that frequented the bar, the cocaine appeared to have Dallas appeared to have a cocaine connection. In other words, there were either people associated with the bar that were pushing cocaine, or there were cocaine pushers allowed into the bar. Whatever the case was, one could purchase cocaine from the underage male prostitute and from the male prostitutes that worked the bar. Whether these boys were buying it from sources on their own or whether it was part of an organized thing, I don't know, but it was available. They asked him if he ever purchased it, and he said no, he did not have authorization to make those purchases. And now they are asking about transportation. Somebody would call from Washington to New York or vice versa, and then a call boy would be sent up. It's kind of expensive, isn't it? And he says, yes, it was. Who paid for that transportation? From the information that I got over a number of years on investigating call services, it's generally the client who makes all the arrangements for transportation of the call boys, and it is not the call service that puts out the bill. So that makes sense to me, right? In respect to the relocation of a call boy from one town to another, I think there was a testimony to the effect that after they worked a particular city for a while, then they gravitate onto some other cities. And he says that this is another type of operation. And he says, who pays for the transportation for this? Mr. Smith says, the organization that is transporting the boys would be paying for that transportation. And he asks, were you able to ascertain or able to, at least, suspect how far up and how organized this callboy operation was? He says, I was able to suspect that the callboy service operations that were operating in Washington had some connection to the organized crime in New York. Can you tell me, at least loosely, what that connection was? He says the connection appeared to be with the trafficking of information on the clients, which would obviously be very useful to organized crime. You think? Yeah. This whole thing has been so revelatory for me in just the most beat me over the head with it type of way. And he says that would be separate and apart, would it not, from the callboy operation? He says not necessarily. It may be obtained as a result of that callboy operation, but that was a separate segment, was it not? And this is where someone kind of puts their foot down, which I appreciate because these senators are a bunch of pricks. Senator, the relationships between prostitution and pornography businesses are very complicated, and some of them are very loose, and some of them are quite organized, existing at the same time, if you can understand this, that there may be a connection between the trafficking of information between the call services and organized crime, but these connections are reinforced by, let's say, other businesses, other business ventures, joint ventures. What might be? It might be real estate. It might be pornography. And what I have been able to develop, it appears that pornography plays some part in this connection. Would you say that the pornography in the callboy is a jumping off point for other types of illegal activity? Very much so. Prostitution and pornography appear to be two sides of the same coin. It says, did you ever run across any evidence of some of these youngsters being held in this business against their will? And he says, no, I did not. In fact, many of the youngsters were willing participants. However, if you look at this problem in the light of drug coercion, then I think we could say that these kids were being held against their will, because sometimes these kids are introduced to drugs and plied with drugs for a period of time that they cease to have any type of capabilities of judgment for themselves, and some of them are too young to even have any type of responsible judgment. And then he asks, is there a specific pattern that you can develop of drug use by these kids? I think that the prostitution and drug uses is very much together. The drug usage goes with it. The life, the experiences that some of these people go through makes them susceptible to drug use. And he says, I think that we know with respect to female prostitutes that many of them are hooked and are dependent upon their pimps for their supply, and that is why they remain as prostitutes. Are you saying with respect to these youngsters, because that's true with respect to the female prostitutes? And he says, no, this is a result of his own observations. And I don't say that the youngsters are being hooked on heroin. What I am saying is that they are being introduced to barbiturates, basically, is what a lot of the younger kids get into. They develop a habit into barbiturates. Xanax, Valium, things of that nature is what he's referring to. But to get a young child to perform, let's say for a sex movie or for a prostitution service, especially if he hasn't had that much experience in it, sometimes you have a willing boy to work for a call service in a very passive way. But to get this boy to be active and actually commit homosexual acts on his own, rather than taking the passive role, drugs are used very much to coerce the boy into acting this way. And they ask, do you know of any instances where drugs were withheld from a youngster until he performed? And he says, no, he did not. Do you know of any of these kids being arrested? What have your observations been with respect to law enforcement arrest? And he says, I have not observed law enforcement actively arresting underage kids. So he says, you have not? And he says, no. Would you care to characterize the activities of law enforcement officials with respect to these underage kids? I think they have a difficult time. There doesn't appear to be any support from the courts. And I mean, I am talking right now as of my own opinion, not as from my knowledge, but there doesn't appear to be any money funding specialized units that would be able to take care of these problems. How about a cop on the beat who observes 40 or 50 kids in the bar underage when they aren't supposed to be there to begin with? Do you need a special unit for that? Senator, if you check the court records in the state of New York, and what incentive does a policeman have to arrest any type of underage prostitute or any type of offense like this? Send it to the courts and then have the judge pass out almost a slap on the wrist to the offenders, to the pimps, or to the operators. The case of Paul Abrams, where he received a probation, was running underage children, was quite a large operation, had links to organized crime. And right here, Senator, in the Abrams case, we sent a full report to the judge, who sent a letter back saying he did not want to hear from the committee. And next time we talk about this, I'll show you guys, they will not release the files on Paul Abrams. People have tried. They put a huge axe on that with FOIA. So that tells me that there's a lot of smoke there. And obviously, Senator Bernstein, he's aware of that, obviously. So he says, now, then what we can conclude from what you have said and have observed is that underage prostitution has a very, very low priority. Insofar as law enforcement officials are concerned and insofar as the judicial system is concerned. Is that correct? And Mr. Smith says, I have had talks with prosecutors. I have had talks even on Capitol Hill with individuals who ought to be involved with the problem of juvenile pornography. I was told that juvenile pornography and prostitution was a cottage industry, that it was not worth the time or the effort to go after. However, my findings, the findings of the committee, differ with that opinion. A cottage industry. A cottage industry. Capitol Hill. That's your tax dollars at work. You, as someone who has investigated and seen some of the impacts and resultant effects, would you say that it is something with which we should be concerned? And he says, yes, that's literally the reason why we're holding this committee. Literally. So what can be done with respect to reducing, because you are not going to eliminate it completely, but reducing child prostitution, both male and female? And he says that is a policy question. I can only answer that question as a private citizen. And he says, as a private citizen, I could say that providing the law enforcement agencies with a weapon, an effective weapon, to go out and investigate, and giving these law enforcement agencies the backing of the judicial system, I think that a realistic understanding of the public and in the courts is where the problem lies. We have many Oftentimes, we have prosecuting attorneys that look at prostitution as a victimless crime. However, in these cases, the children themselves are victims. In a lot of cases, the lives of these children involved are unsalvageable. In our society, I don't think that we can afford to throw away so many kids. And then he asks, in your experience, did you find that male prostitution, female prostitution of underage kids eventually leads to other and more advanced illegal activities on their parts? And he says, yes, it does. It seems to be a pattern that once, especially among the boys, once a boy is introduced to being a juvenile prostitute, chances are when he becomes an adult, he is going to be a pederast. This has been the case, and I followed this on one boy that we had studied in 77 with the committee. I kept track of his escapades, his career, and he went from being a 14-year-old boy prostitute to being an adult pederast without interest, as apart from what we might term as the regular type of homosexual. This boy developed a proclivity for very young kids. And they ask, was there any evidence of gravitating into other forms of illegal activity, such as robbery and burglary? He says, of course, the whole industry. The lifestyle is an antisocial lifestyle. It brings these kids at an early time in their life into contact with some of the worst types of people in our society. I am talking about murderers, drug dealers, organized criminals. It can't help. This contact can't help but affect these children, these kids' development. Would you conclude then that if we were able to reduce a substantial degree juvenile prostitution, that you would have a reduction also in the other types of crimes subsequently? Yeah, it seems to follow that route. That's the natural conclusion of addressing these problems, right? That's the natural conclusion. And let's see. What did he ask here? Oh, yeah, this one was really interesting for me. So, his final question: I don't know whether in the course of your investigations, did you find any central attorney or firm of attorneys representing these people in various and different areas? For instance, in Washington, there have been various attorneys that will show up that will handle the defense for a number of the call services. How about New York? In New York, I have not been involved in that part of the investigation. Now, we're going to go ahead and stop here because I feel like I'm going cross-eyed. I know my Wi-Fi is probably being really lame. However, I told you guys that, because I'm going to pull it up because I ended there for a reason, besides the fact that I'm sick of reading, that the author of Eye of the Chicken Hawk had reached out to me, right? So I'd made that thread. The thread wasn't really like groundbreaking or anything, right? But I decided to see if I could find, maybe, because I hadn't heard of Roy Abrams before. So Roy Abrams? No, not Roy Abrams. Roy Ames, sorry. Getting my notorious pederast mixed up. I hadn't heard of Ames before. For fuck's sake, excuse my French. I gotta stop swearing so much. Somebody needs to hit a horn or something. It needs to go off in my earbuds when I swear, because it's very unladylike. I'm sorry. So, he had reached out to me. He had left a comment on the thread, though, when I pointed out the parallels of Roy Ames and Michael Thevis in the entertainment industry. And he said, wow, that would be really interesting if there was a connection to Michael Thevis. So, what we just read about the attorneys, right? If you have seen before in my Mitch Werbel episode, his lawyer was key to making some other connections, right? And I found the exact same thing here because there is a connection from Michael Thevis to this network. So I'm going to show you guys real quick. Then I'm going to say hi to the chat and then I'm going to dip out because my brain be fried. But here we go. So, found the connection between Roy Ames and Michael Thevis. They had the same lawyer, Gilbert H. Deitch. The same lawyer who was indicted for conspiring to murder former Thevis accomplice turned state witness Roger Dean Underhill. And indeed, the exact same lawyer, he still has a practice today. Yeah, he still has a practice today. But he was Roy Ames's lawyer at the exact same time that he was Michael Thevis's lawyer. So take that to the bank, okay? Because that makes a connection to those networks. And then we already have very, very strong established ties to Wayne Williams, right? Because Michael Thevis was Wayne Williams's boss. And for some reason, Michael Thevis's attorneys end up representing Wayne Williams at various points throughout his jail time, prison time. It's all just very bizarre. And I don't really know what to tell people. You know, I wish that I had a path that I was going to stick on, uh, or like a line of thought that I could make cohesive as far as like, we're going to do this, this, and this. But I find stuff and I get excited and I want to show you. But I feel like there's only like 20 more pages left of that hearing. So we'll burn through that pretty quick next time because I think that that lays a really strong foundation that is factual, that is official record, that, you can't come at me and call me QAnon. You can if you want, but then that just means that you're being a troll and you don't actually care about the truth. You can just be honest with everybody and say that you don't care and that these topics are not important to you. Because again, people love to come out and say that like they're trying to save the kids, they're trying to help the kids, they're trying to do this and that. You can't do that if you do not understand how things get to this point, right? History provides context. Context is very important. I think it helps you focus. And obviously, I really, really want to figure out all of the ties between the Thebus network and the Atlanta network and Texas. And now Washington, right? Now Washington. This is just such a disgusting, thriving economy. A thriving economy. But, there's a lot of trolls out there. And obviously, 5-foot fuckwad sitting there saying that, this is all conspiracy theories and whatnot. And I'm not going to say, excuse my French on that one. This is something that's important to me. And again, I'm not calling anybody a criminal, right? I'm not calling anybody a criminal unless I have proof of a crime that has been charged. But I am allowed to ask questions. I am. And again, eventually, it'll probably be a little while. I will come back and we will discuss the baiters, right? And that's right. You can't stop anything if you don't know your enemy. Yep. And people that hurt kids or pretend to help kids and pretend to give a fuck about Diddy and Epstein and Peter Nygaard and Tim Ballard and, want to make really stupid comparisons about those types of things. Yeah, I would say that that's an enemy of mine. And I don't have a problem saying that at all. Because I think that eventually all of this is going to show everybody, in my personal opinion, from what I know, my studies, that the timing of what people refer to as the satanic panic, you're going to see why that was so important. Yeah. But this is just my crazy conspiracy theory. Apparently I'm out here just attacking everyone with my research. Everybody feels attacked. I tell you what my opinion is. I show you my sources. I tell you when I'm, speculating or providing conjecture. And that just shows me that you think that your audience is stupid. I wouldn't necessarily disagree at this point because I've kind of lost my patience. You are who you surround yourself with, and everybody has a fully developed frontal lobe to choose what they listen to and what they engage with. But again, this is important to me, and this is a serious topic, and I will take breaks in the interim and discuss process related things because obviously all of this is emotionally and mentally draining. You know what I mean? but I don't really care what people think of me. And I don't really care how many views I get or subscribers that I get. And I don't ask anybody for anything except for to hear me out. If you're here, hear me out and have an open mind, because this is important. This is very important. So I'm going to leave it here for now, and I will talk to you guys very, very soon. Stay safe.